Hello, my name is Greg Kasavin, and I'm writer and creative director at Supergiant Games, the developers of Hades, and I am here to introduce the Iliad Community Project, a big undertaking by members of the Hades community to record the Iliad of Homer in its entirety in the oral tradition it comes from. And when they invited me to say a few words at the beginning of the production, I was very excited to say yes, and here are those words. If you're listening to this, chances are you've fought your way from the darkest reaches of the underworld of Greek myth time and again, and come to know and maybe even understand Hades, the feared god of the dead, and many other members of his big, complicated family. The 2020 video game named after him is one of countless works inspired by Greek myth, and owes a lot to classical mythology, tales dating back thousands of years, which have made names such as Zeus, Athena, and Achilles famous around the world even after all this time. Hades, the game, requires no prior knowledge of or appreciation for Greek myth, but if you're familiar with the source material, it's even better. It, and a lot of things. There's nothing quite so rewarding as returning to the source of the media that inspires us. Maybe you've looked up the first album of a favorite band to discover they're the hidden promise they would unlock in their later work. Maybe you've picked up the books that inspired some of your favorite movies or television shows. Maybe you've gone back and played the earliest titles in your favorite game series. Returning to original works can be a fascinating experience in its own right, but better still, it can enhance our appreciation and understanding of the media we already love. That favorite album sounds even richer somehow knowing where the band got its start. That favorite movie or show is even better knowing some of the specific choices made to adapt the source material. And the great thing about classic source material is, in a way, it never gets old. After all, that's what it means to be a classic. Welcome to some of the most classic source material of recorded history. Dating back to around the 8th century BC, the Iliad of Homer is the story of the Trojan War and rage-filled Achilles, the near-invincible demigod whose actions single-handedly turned the tide of this long and brutal conflict. This is what's called an epic poem. Like the work itself, the term epic has had a lasting impact and is more widely used today than ever as a bit of English slang. But epic didn't always mean awesome or big or purple with good stats. Its modest origins are rooted in the Greek word for a story or tale, and the Iliad is among the first such stories or tales passed down orally, meaning they were not originally written down or read, but told and retold, listened to, as you are listening now. You're undoubtedly familiar with works that draw inspiration from the Iliad. You know and probably can't even remember when you first learned some of the big names, Olympians such as Ares and Aphrodite, or famous warriors and kings such as Odysseus and Agamemnon. But there's so much more to these characters even beyond their illustrious reputations, and it's all there in the Iliad, waiting to be discovered. Understanding these characters and their fears and motivations is rewarding in itself, but better still, understanding them helps us to understand ourselves and each other. We've changed a lot in the last 3,000 years, but in some respects, judging by the nature of the many personal and often fatal mistakes made in the Iliad, we haven't changed all that much. So, here's a promise. By engaging with the Iliad now, whether again or for the first time, and in light of everything you know and have experienced, you will be better off for it. You will come away with a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the Olympians, that dysfunctional family of gods whose whims and infighting provide such a compelling insight into the worldview of the ancient Greeks. You will come away with a new appreciation for this tale's complicated protagonist, Achilles, who adamantly refused to go to war and would have been content to live out his life peacefully, even knowing eternal glory awaited if only he took up arms. You'll be struck by the many unflinching portrayals of violence in a tale that captures the terrible personal cost of war, where no soldier is anonymous and Black Death can claim the freshest recruit or the strongest warrior just as quickly. You'll come away with a new appreciation for the style of the verse itself, such as the recurring epithets used to describe key characters, one of the signature features of Homer's poetry. The swift runner Achilles, the great tactician Odysseus, each repetition of these types of titles cements these characters' legendary status. Through it all, you will gain an even greater appreciation for the media you already love. You may well come away with a deeper understanding of life itself. The Iliad is a supernatural story, but at its heart, it's a war story. Maybe and arguably the greatest war story of all time. It is filled with awful cruelty and gruesome and vivid descriptions of violence. It expresses the duality of war, that all the violence and incalculable human cost has a certain terrible allure, that from such a senseless and tragic event, glory emerges. Here lies the darkness of the human heart, heavily influenced as it is by the whims of the gods, who themselves have sided against each other as part of this war, who also have darkness in their hearts. One of the most compelling ideas of Greek myth is that the gods themselves are very far from perfect, raising the question, if even the gods can't be perfect, what hope do we have? The Iliad is filled with death, but it's a living story whose legacy is alive and well. The audio adaptation you are about to hear is based on an English translation of the Iliad by Robert Fagles. This recording is the work of an international group united in their interest in Hades the video game, and in the game's connection to the classics that inspired it. The many different voices comprising this recording represent a broad range of experiences, including a variety of experience with professional voice recording. This reflects the development of the video game, whose cast ranged from seasoned experts to those who had never worked before as voiceover artists. And in turn, this reflects the tradition of how the Iliad survives all these thousands of years later. No previous experience is required to share what you love. The Iliad is a challenging work, but as a game player, as a Hades player, it's likely you welcome challenge and intuitively understand that challenge is intrinsically linked to a sense of reward. The Iliad starts in medias res, or in the middle of things, a technique that Hades and all prior titles from developer Supergiant Games draw from Homeric tradition. So, it asks you to piece together the circumstances as you quickly take in many different details. The Iliad is filled with seemingly countless different names of people and places, so much that it can be difficult to keep track of it all. Still, the feeling and atmosphere of the work will wash over you, and the pacing of it is unusually distinct by the standards of 3,000 years later. Whenever the tale moves away from Achilles' story into some other episode or tangent, tension builds for what is to come. Humor is there too, by no means a modern invention. The bickering of the gods often takes on a darkly comic quality, especially knowing we mortals will be on the receiving end when they vent their anger. The Iliad survives because it is a profoundly human story. How much have we really changed as a people, as a species, in 3,000 years? Have we overcome our ancient flaws, prejudices, and impulses? The Iliad also survives because it is a uniquely prophetic story, one whose protagonist is faced with the literal choice of a long life of peace or a short, violent life that brings him eternal glory. You know which path he chose, because here we are now, still reflecting on his glory. And, most importantly, the Iliad survives because it invites adaptation. The muses themselves may have originally inspired this work, but it has proceeded to inspire innumerable authors and creators ever since. After all, so much of the complexity of what it means to be human is encoded in the Iliad, so maybe it will inspire you in turn. Thank you for listening.